It was a quiet Sunday morning in the suburbs of Brooksville. Birds were chirping, lawns were freshly cut, and neighbors greeted each other with polite smiles. Inside one of those houses lived Margaret Wilson, a woman in her early 50s. She prided herself on being traditional, but deep down, her beliefs were tinted with prejudice, ones she never questioned, until that day. Margaret lived alone, her husband had passed away years ago, and her grown children rarely visited. She spent most mornings reading the paper with her coffee, and complaining about how things have changed too much. But that peaceful morning turned into a nightmare in seconds. Margaret was in the kitchen when she heard a pop. Then another. Before she could react, smoke began to fill the air. She coughed, stumbling backward as flames licked up from behind the stove. Fire! Oh my God, she screamed, grabbing a towel to fan the flames, but it was useless. The curtains caught fire, the alarm blared, and panic set in. She rushed to the phone, her hands shaking. 911, there's a fire. Please hurry. Minutes later, the sound of sirens filled the neighborhood. Red lights flashed outside her window. She stumbled to the door, coughing and terrified. The smoke was getting thicker. She could barely see through it. Then, the front door burst open. Through the haze came a tall man in full firefighting gear, helmet glinting, oxygen mask hanging loose. "Ma'am. Are you all right?" he shouted. Margaret squinted through the smoke, and then her expression changed. Her eyes narrowed. The firefighter took off his mask and said calmly, "I'm here to get you out. Let's go." But Margaret froze. You're," she stuttered. He blinked, confused. "Ma'am, we don't have time. The fire's spreading." She backed away. "No. I don't need your help. Someone else will come." The firefighter stared in disbelief. "Ma'am, please, I'm trained for this. You're in danger." But Margaret shook her head, coughing violently. Just send someone else." Behind him, another firefighter called out, "Chris. The flames are moving fast." Chris, that was his name, turned toward the voice, then back at her. "I'm not leaving you here," he said firmly. Ignoring her protests, he wrapped his jacket around her and guided her toward the door. She tried to resist, but the smoke was suffocating. By the time they reached the porch, she nearly collapsed. Chris lifted her up and carried her out, just as part of the ceiling gave way behind them. Outside, paramedics rushed in. Neighbors watched from across the street. Some whispered in disbelief. Chris gently set her on a stretcher. "You're safe now, ma'am," he said softly. Margaret was trembling. Why would you help me after I..." He smiled faintly. "Because that's my job. Fire doesn't care about color. And neither should saving lives." Those words hit her harder than the smoke ever could. Hours later, the fire was out. The house was damaged, but she was alive. As firefighters packed up their gear, Margaret sat under a blanket, watching Chris speak to the chief. A young girl from next door, maybe 8 years old, ran up to her. "Miss Margaret, that firefighter was so brave. He's a hero." Margaret's throat tightened. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, he is." The next day, she went to the fire station. She walked in nervously, clutching a small box of cookies and a thank you card. Chris looked up in surprise when he saw her. "Mrs. Wilson," he said kindly. "Feeling better?" She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "I came to apologize," she said. "You risked your life for me, and I treated you horribly. I don't deserve your kindness." Chris shook his head. "Ma'am, we don't do this for thanks. But if you really want to make it right, just treat the next person you meet with the same respect you'd want." She blinked, speechless. Weeks passed. Her house began repairs. Life slowly went back to normal, but Margaret wasn't the same. She started volunteering at a local community center, the same one Chris worked with off-duty. She helped organize fire safety classes for kids of all backgrounds. At first, people were surprised to see her there. But over time, her actions spoke louder than her past. One afternoon, Chris stopped by the class. He watched her helping a young boy learn to use a fire extinguisher. When their eyes met, she smiled. "Learning from the best," she said quietly. He nodded. "And teaching others to do better, that's how change starts." From that day on, Margaret carried a simple truth in her heart, one she wished she'd learned sooner: heroes come in all colors, and kindness knows no boundaries. Because sometimes, it takes walking through fire, to finally see the light.